Okay, well, welcome everyone. We are looking at our February 2026 webinar, and this is predominantly for sellers, but also interesting for buyers. But our special guest today is Aaron Bell, and he's with Pillar to Post Home Inspections. And we're going to be going over the inspection process, some of the myths, some of the facts, and some of the things to expect, and what have you. So, first of all, Aaron, before I forget, tell us how long you've been in the business and tell us how someone can contact you. What's your phone number?
Been doing this about 11, almost 11 years. My wife and I moved from Colorado, and when we moved here, we purchased the business from a guy that was retiring. It has been a phenomenal business. I've loved every bit of it, getting to know realtors, helping people in the inspection process buy homes. We are on the web, pillartopost.com. But our phone number is 435-867-6400. You can call or text, but there's a lot of other ways you can get a hold of us as well, but that's the primary way. But just want to say thanks for having me on. This is a new experience for me, but always glad to sit and have a conversation about home inspections.
Well, perfect. And I know we talked earlier before the show about, I think I've known you for the whole 11 years you've been here. But
It's been a long time.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've had clients use you over and over again. But anyway, so we're going to talk about home inspections, and basically what I tell buyers and sellers is your home's getting inspected, and that inspector, he's going to give you a report, and it's going to make it look like your home needs to be bulldozed down. Here's the reality. All homes have challenges. We have to decide which ones are big and which ones are small, which ones we can ask for maybe the seller to repair, or which ones just aren't that big of a deal. And that's what we're going to help discern. But also, as a realtor, and this does change time to time, what things are normal to ask for and that get done, and what things aren't normal. Because sometimes, like an electrical issue, if something's wired wrong in the main box or something like that, that potentially could be a hazard, a fire hazard, all sorts of things could be a problem from that. And it's pretty normal for sellers to have that fixed because they don't want to get sued, and different
right,
things like that. But then there's other things where it's, you know, I don't know. I think of windows all the time, but there might be fogging in between, so in between the panes of windows. Well, I think pretty much any windows that are 10 years or older that are exposed to the sun in southern Utah, they have some form of seal breakage.
sure,
And a lot of people think you have to rip out the stucco and replace the window, and it's like, no, you can just get a glass pack from Jones Pat, paint and glass. It's kind of outpatient surgery. It's not that big of a deal, but it can
right,
be something to be addressed, or it could be just a minor cosmetic thing that you see, at certain times a year and you don't see it other times a year. So there's different variables on how much this means to someone or not as a buyer. But one thing I really appreciate about you and your presentation is you do answer all the questions, but you don't do it in an alarming manner. You do it in a manner that says, you know what, this happens, it's pretty typical. It might be the age of the home, it might be this, but it's something that can be fixed.
right,
And
right.
that means a lot, especially to buyers, because
Yeah,
buyers are nervous anyway. And depending on the marketplace, if they've got backup, other houses that they could move to, they're not looking to move to another house because obviously they invested in your inspection, but in their back of their mind, sometimes that is what they're thinking. It's like, you know, if there's too many things wrong, and every inspection report has a ton of things wrong with it. So
right.
anyway, thank you for the way that you communicate with
Yeah, well,
clients.
on that note, communication's huge. And in my opinion, it's probably the number one most important thing is what and how is something being communicated? Because like you said, um, if you're alarming people, if you're causing more concern in or creating more anxieties for the people buying the home, you're probably not communicating it in the right way, right? Like you mentioned windows. With those sorts of things, it really maybe boiled down to a lack of knowledge of what's actually going on or what it takes to actually fix that repair, right? They think, oh, the window's going to cost, you got to replace the whole window, like you said, and that's going to cost thousands of dollars. Well, no, it might just be a couple $100 just to do the window pack, like you said, and just do the glass. And so what we're really trying to do is maintain a perspective of the home because you go on the internet and you start searching up whatever and you can get a lot of bad information and then your thoughts and everything just starts spiraling and it just becomes this much bigger issue. So we like to communicate with the buyers in a way that we find out what their anxieties are, we find out what their concerns are, and then we address those with good solid information. How do
Yeah,
you move forward? What is this actually going to cost? What's the potential if I don't do anything about this, right? So,
sure.
and then with all that information, it brings them back into reality so that they're not, middle of the night, you know, on the keyboard, with their brain going all over the place.
Yeah,
So we really try to
ex-
just keep it into perspective. So.
yeah, exactly. Now, talk to me about inspections, pre-sale inspections. So, most of the time, the buyer orders an inspection from you, and that's, because they're under contract. But there's also a service you offer for sellers who want to get an inspection done beforehand. So maybe they can start chipping away at those repairs or at least know what they're going to be up against prior to it. I know it's not as common as the home inspection that gets ordered while you're in escrow, but tell us about some of the advantages of a pre-sale home inspection.
Yeah, so definitely a great tool. It is an opportunity for the seller to maybe know what's going on inside their home. Surprisingly enough, uh, uh, you know, I've done home inspections where I go through the house and they're like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with this house." And I start looking at something and they're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." And it's just, out of sight, out of mind. They've filtered it out. And so you do these inspections to, have that information in the forefront, maybe remind them of some things that, have gone on in the home, but most importantly, to provide them information. Once they have, a list of things that could potentially be problems, I'll say it that way, because not all the time will an issue become a problem for a buyer.
Yeah,
But they may want to address something preemptively, be proactive about something to maybe reduce the possible concerns that a buyer might have in purchasing their home. And that could be the difference between that buyer buying their house or someone else's house.
yeah, and I think as a realtor, that's kind of a big thing in my eyes too. And I'm probably going to start encouraging sellers to do that more often than not, because a lot of times I would say with probably 60 or 70% of my sellers, if there's a problem with the house, they want to fix it. They want to get it,
Right.
taken care of within reason, of course. And they're definitely not looking to hide stuff because they've had the fear of Dave put in them about getting sued if they, try to hide something. But most
Yeah.
sellers,
Yeah.
they want to be honest about what they're doing, but they also want the knowledge, as you say, in order to move forward. So let's talk about some of the biggest kind of things that you find in home inspections, mechanical systems, moisture, structural safety. Tell me about like your different packages, what they offer, yeah, and kind of the things that pop up over and over that you find.
Yeah. So every house is different. We'll just start off there. I mean, you have new construction ranging to, something that might be 120 years old and everything ranging in different conditions. Everybody takes care of their home in different ways, but also there's remodeling or repairs that are made on a certain. So every home across the board is always going to be different. So we're not going to be able to provide, the same report for this house as that house, right?
Yeah,
All the repairs are different. Things are going to come up, but we provide services and packages that match what that buyer or that seller's concern level is, right? If they know that they've never had a roof leak, well, they may not want to get the infrared scan that includes scanning the ceilings and walls for, you know, water leaks and whatnot, right? So
Yeah.
everything's tailored to the individual, and everything is, maybe someone is more budget conscious than others. Maybe some are more health conscious, and so we offer some services that are geared towards, maybe the health of the home, if you will, mold and radon, meth testing, those sorts of things. But ultimately, the client has is in the driver's seat as far as what they want done in the home. But regardless, every home gets the same basic home inspection that covers all the appliances, the roof, the exterior, all the systems and components inside the home. So
Yeah. Okay. And talk to me little bit about, you just mentioned meth, you mentioned radon, mold testing. The meth testing, I know I've had on, certain homes that we were working with buyers who were buying a HUD foreclosure, for example, several years ago. And at that point in time, I was told that like a high percentage of rental homes, even in Washington County, have signs of meth contamination. My mind was blown. But um, in reality, we haven't run across it that many times. But then again, a lot of my buyers haven't, necessarily tested for it. But it's predominantly because we're not going after rental homes a lot of times, probably. But moving over to
sure,
radon, that is something that I've always recommended, but up until recently, clients have kind of like, no, that's an extra, whatever it is to have that test done. We're not going to have it done. Um, Recently, I've had a couple buyers do that and have found levels that were too high. And I thought in, both cases, maybe it would kill the deal. But the reality is it was only like $2,500 to remediate it. It was kind of interesting. They
right,
drill a hole under the slab and pipe out through an exhaust fan up above the roof and make it looks like a gutter on the house. And it's just really not that big of a deal to mitigate it. But
right.
tell me about, like radon, what you know about radon.
So in southern Utah, we generally have lower levels of radon. There's lower concentrations. I've never done a test and that test come back at zero. There's always been some level of radon. The way we test for it is we set up a device somewhere in the home, usually in centrally located or in a bedroom. And then what that device does is every hour it takes a measurement or a reading, and then over the course of 48 hours, you have 48 data points that then they average what that radon level is. So the average might come back at below 4.0, which is the recommended, the limit where they recommend additional repairs be done or mitigation to take place. But so all the majority of your data points might be below that 4.0, but you might have one that spikes at a certain time of day or night for whatever reason to 6 or 8 or whatever, and then it drops down, right? So um, so it's an average of all these data points. But radon, there's the myth that radon only occurs in basements. Radon's a gas that comes up out of the ground. So anything that we put or park on the ground has the potential of having radon, right? So we test the home for the concentration or the average and use that information to determine if we should move forward with mitigation. And going into the cost side, so there's this worry or this concern that it's dangerous, it's hazardous. Well, when you get into the cost of it, like you said, $2,500 is about the average, probably very that dollar amount is probably very common in most homes. I don't think it varies very much, but when we put it into perspective to the tires on your car, a refrigerator or a new washer or dryer, some people's will pay that much for a new computer.
Yeah.
So when you put it into perspective, the cost to mitigate something like that really is in line with some of the other expenses that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about water drainage and mold. And, they're two different subjects, but, I hear all the time from people like, we don't need gutters because this is Southern Utah, it hardly ever rains. I'm going to have you address that because that also has to do with foundation issues. But then on the other side, I hear people say, mold issues, at least we don't have mold issues here, it's too dry. So can you
right.
address both those different things?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, you're right that people will say we live in a desert, so we don't have moisture problems, we don't have water issues, and which then how could we have mold if we don't have any water, right? And so, uh, then there's the drainage issues with outside settling of foundations and whatnot. Um, uh, Moisture issues can develop from anything. You could have a leak underneath the sink that, goes unnoticed or doesn't get identified. You could have a leak from a toilet that, you're not going to see that leak until it starts dripping from the ceiling downstairs, right? Or it starts damaging the materials around it. And so when these leaks or water intrusion issues go unnoticed for a period of time, that's when you could have a mold issue, right? So it's sometimes doesn't have anything to do with what the outside climate is, has everything to do with what's going on the inside of the home. But well, yeah, two different services that we do offer is mold testing, radon testing, just so that home buyers can be aware of what is going on and again having the information to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, foundation issues around here can be kind of a thing that comes up. We were talking about this before. We had a client that was flipping a home and we were about a year into the process. And all of a sudden it was a home that was 35 years old and it started developing cracks. And one rainstorm that had driving rains coming from a certain direction put enough water into an area that all of a sudden it became a problem, whereas it's never had that problem before in
Right.
35 years. And so, yeah, they had to hire, a local company called Base Co to come in and shore everything up. And the owner decided to re-concrete to have more slope coming away from the house and, things like that. So it actually did end up costing the owner quite a bit of money when it was all said and done. But the reality is you have to do it once you see a problem like that because no one's going to buy the house. I mean, when they see that, you
Yeah,
know.
foundation issues are sometimes some of the biggest concerns that people have. They'll come to an inspection, they'll say, I just want to make sure it's not falling down, right?
Yeah.
That'll be the first thing out of their mouth, you know. And mostly because of the concern, but then also because of the cost or the dollar amount to fix it, right? And then the fear also that is associated with settling or foundation issues is, well, it happened once. Is it going to happen again? What happens when this repair wasn't adequate for what the problem actually entailed? You know, who's on the hook then? Is there a warranty that comes with it? And so it brings up a lot of questions and concerns, valid questions and concerns for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time, I mean, I've had, I don't know, maybe a dozen different experiences in my 23 years of foundational issues that come to play. And in every single case, they found the source. They found the problem. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of times it's just a downspout that's, you know, is running off into the wrong place and it needs to be rerouted. Sometimes it's gutters that are clogged. Sometimes it's what else has happened? Oh, there was a stream under a house one time. That was real interesting up in Springdale. And it was, the grading wasn't done proper. There wasn't proper drainage in the back of the house to where literally a river during water, flowed under the house and lifted stuff up and whatnot. But yeah, those can be big issues. Um, Talk to me about mechanical systems because I know For example, air conditioning systems are a big deal around here because it gets hot in the summer. And I've seen on a report before that we couldn't test the air conditioner because it's winter time. Talk me about, walk me through that.
Yeah, so other than foundation, your roof and your major appliances being your furnace and air conditioning unit, um, those systems are going to be the high dollar amount, and some of the most important things that go with a house. And like you said, being in southern Utah with the desert climate that we have, AC is a big deal, right? But even though we live in a desert area or desert climate, hot climate, we do still experience some of those low temperatures. And believe it or not, 60 degrees is a beautiful day in St. George, right?
Yeah.
But when temperatures are below 60 degrees, it might be 55 degrees, it's strongly recommended not to test the AC unit because the way the unit operates is it has to the oils and the lubricants inside there have to be above a certain degree to properly lubricate the parts inside that unit. So when it is below that temperature, there's always going to be some potential for damage to the unit.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
what,
unfortunate that it happens, but we just want to be safe and not be damaging people's equipment.
absolutely. And what I tell my buyers, if I'm representing a buyer, is, we've got a home warranty in place, 99 out of 100 times. And, sometimes they need to upgrade the home warranty to cover the AC, or other mechanical systems that might fail, but kind of worth its weight in gold because if something does come up, it's going to come up during the, hot season, and you've got a
Right,
year for coverage that way, and then kind of lets the seller off the hook because the seller, might have thought maybe my air conditioning isn't working so great, but they never had it checked out. But they don't want the liability of it either afterwards a year later. So home warranties oftentimes can help resolve those, potential issues on that. And there's also a lot of unscrupulous AC people that will come out and, it might need a condenser, but they say, oh, this is 12 years old. It needs to be replaced. And I mean,
right,
unfortunately, I see that all the time. And, the reality is someone like you who's coming in and can kind of give a neutral testimony of, yeah, your unit's 12 years old. And, a lot of times they do wear out between 15 and 20 years. But also, if you take care of them and, have servicing done on a regular basis, it might not be so bad. I mean, I live in a home where I think we built this home, I don't know, 22 years ago, I think. And we still have our original AC. We just have it inspected every so often by our AC guy, our HVAC guy.
yep,
And he's had to replace, I don't even know the parts, condensers and capacitors and whatever. But, the reality is he kind of shows us what to look out for. So you're real good at that, as I mentioned before, about just communication, even though you're not diving into the mechanics of that unit. When you do your inspection, it's an on-off thing for you. And in the summertime, you're
right,
measuring the temperature. But anyway, we
right,
I've always appreciated that about you is that you're real good at communicating that it's not necessarily a dire situation for a lot of, different things. And, that kind of brings us into our last thing that I wanted to talk about before we go. And that's deal breakers and negotiated items that from the realtor's perspective become deal breakers. There's really, I mean, the bigger things that I've seen come up, and we've talked about it already, are foundation issues. Sometimes people are concerned about windows, fogging windows. And the reality is, I used to sell windows, but in southern Utah, with the sun hitting a window, that seal's going to break within 10 years, 12 years anyway, or start leaking. And you might have fogging, but that doesn't mean you have to rip out the stucco there and replace a whole window. You can just get what's called a
right,
glass pack from Jones Paint and Glass, and it's outpatient surgery. It might be, 500, $1,000, whatever the size of the window, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. But roof issues can be a deal breaker, but every house I've ever had an inspection on had roof issues, like cracked tiles. Those come up all the time on
Yeah.
tiles. Tell me about the difference between tile roofs and the asphalt shingles.
Yeah. Well, to kind of piggyback off of some of the things that you've already said is, you know, I try to present the information in a way that anything can be managed, right? Anything can be repaired, right? When we get to the dollars and cents of an issue, you know, like windows, like you said, some people might have a big concern with fogged seals or failed seals and fogged windows, but then when they realize, oh, it's going to be only a couple $100 to fix that, that whole issue kind of just goes away,
Yeah,
right? When they know what the cost, we all understand dollars and cents, right? But our background brings different concerns and anxieties of purchasing a home. I might be selling what I feel a perfect house is, so I feel like I should be entitled to purchase a perfect house. And when there's a concern that comes up, then it's automatically an issue, right? But when you get to the dollars and cents, that's where these things start to kind of fade away, if you will. But to your question about roofs, tile roofs and asphalt shingle roofs are designed for different purposes. You'll find them in different areas of the country, different climates. Um, an asphalt shingle roof wears differently than a tile roof. Tile will crack, so sometimes people think, oh, there's cracked tiles, or they hear that there's, some damaged tiles on the roof, and that becomes a major concern. But when they realize, you can get 10 tiles for $100, and a handyman or a roofer, it's going to take them an hour to replace, three tiles or whatever, and it's only going to cost you a couple $100 to do that. But then knowing, hey, you're also going to have to do this on a regular basis as
yeah,
well. You need to anticipate two, three broken tiles every year. It's not because they just someone walked on them, or a golf ball or something fell on them that broke them. They will crack and break because of the expansion and contraction from the temperatures that we face in this area. With an asphalt shingle roof, similar to broken tiles, with the winds that we get in this area, there's likely going to be some wind damage. So you might get a shingle that's broken, or a shingle that is lifted. And there might be a small area that needs to have two, three different shingles that are replaced. That's totally something that can be done. It doesn't necessarily mean the whole roof has to be replaced. But
yeah,
as far as where a roof will look very differently. An asphalt shingle roof will look very differently at year 18, 20, 21, 22 than a tile roof at 22, 23 years old, right? A
right.
tile roof is essentially going to look exactly the same. So when you walk up to a property that has an asphalt shingle roof that falls into that 20-year, 22-year-old range, it's going to look different. And so there might be some immediate concerns that come up with that. But, when we're talking roofs and costs, they are generally one of the more expensive ticket items if something does have to be replaced.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming to an end of this, and the last thing I wanted you to address is, well, two things. I do want you to give your company contact information again, but also address, do you guys provide costs or repair info for problems that are
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, so we provide a number of tools to help the purchasing process from an inspection standpoint. We offer tools that we think are bring a lot of value, help eliminate phone calls, help speed up different things. And one of those is, like you're saying, we have a repair estimate tool. So we do the inspection. There's a number of repairs that show up in that recommended repairs that show up in that inspection report. the client can go in and request a repair estimate. And then that will give them ballpark figures of what those items will cost to have either repaired by a contractor. Sometimes it's a replacement cost, but it saves them from calling an electrician and a plumber and a roofer because maybe there's repairs in those three different areas. Now you got to wait on that contractor to come out and look at the issue. Then he doesn't get back to you like he said he would with the quote, right? And so now there's a delay in this thing. So our tool comes in handy because it is provided within 24 hours. It has ballpark figures. It's not the same as an exact quote from a local contractor.
Yeah,
And so then it speeds up the process of the transaction. So it's
yeah.
just one of the things that we provide to help with that. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I know time is short, but Aaron with Pillar to Post Home Inspectors in Southern Utah, we cover the whole Southern Utah area. So Iron County, Washington County, we'll go to Beaver, Duck Creek, Orderville, Panguitch. We'll do Enterprise. So pretty much the whole Southern Utah area. But again, really appreciate you having me on, Dave.
Okay, well, real good, Aaron. And if any of you watching this have questions for either one of us, I can be reached. My direct private line is area code 435-703-4041. And Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show and answering questions. And look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, same. Very, very much appreciated, Dave.
All right. Bye bye.